And we're back with Bedtime Stories, Grown-Up Edition. What You Owe Me, Part 5. When we left off, our girl was in the car with her mother-in-law, Miss Brenda. Angela was basically letting her know that while things have been stressful, they've been good. She's been trusting God, and she was interrupted by a phone call from her homeboy from back in the day, LJ. She explained to her mother-in-law that the reason why she didn't answer the phone was because she felt like LJ was basically being messy. Well, surprisingly, Miss Brenda told her she should at least hear what LJ had to say. She told her that just because you hear, that doesn't mean you have to believe. I was just as shocked as you all were to hear this older woman tell her daughter-in-law that she should listen to what clearly appears to be gossip about her son from a man who used to be interested in her daughter-in-law. But I digress. So, as they continue riding to the doctor's office, Angela says to Miss Brenda, "Miss Brenda, I am surprised that you would even suggest that I entertain someone telling me something about my husband, your favorite son." Miss Brenda says, "That's because he's my only son." And they both laugh. She said, "No, baby, let me tell you something. As a woman who was married for 43 years, I can tell you that things are not always what they appear to be. And people don't always have a hidden agenda. Sometimes they're just trying to be helpful. And no, they're not always right. And you're absolutely right, baby. You should never, ever let anybody badmouth your husband to you. You should absolutely stand in the gap for your husband, and he should do the same for you. However, ever be how, you better not ever be the kind of woman who puts her head in the sand and lets herself choke to death. Do you understand me?" Angela says, "Ma'am, I said you better not ever be the kind of woman who puts her head in the sand until she chokes to death. Call your friend." It was in that moment that Angela and Miss Brenda pull up to the fertility clinic. As is customary, they go inside. Miss Brenda has a seat while Angela checks in, and then Angela joins her in the waiting area. Miss Brenda says, "Well, let's just table this conversation for another time. Let's put our hands together, bow our heads, and go ahead and pray. Because you know, in all things, we must pray." Angela and Miss Brenda bow their heads and they begin to pray. Miss Brenda prays over Angela's womb. She prays for God's will. She prays for the doctors and the nurses. She prays over the tests that Angela is about to undergo. Angela is actually going to undergo some tests to make sure that her body is ready for the embryo transplant. She's been taking some hormones that make her uterus ready to receive the implant, basically to make her body believe that she has ovulated and that she is already pregnant, so that her body will not shed its lining when it's time for her menstrual cycle, which allows the embryo to implant into the lining of her uterus. So it's almost as if her body believes that she's already pregnant. So just as Miss Brenda and Angela finish the prayer, they look up and they see the nurse waiting at the door. She says, "Mrs. Washington?" Angela says, "Yes, that's me." The nurse says, "We're ready for you." Angela says, "Oh no, I'm so sorry. I hope you weren't waiting too long." The nurse says, "Oh no, we know the drill." So Angela gets up and she starts walking towards the nurse, and she realizes that Miss Brenda is still sitting in the chair. She says, "Miss Brenda, are you coming?" She says, "Oh, just tell them to come and get me when they're ready." Angela turns around and looks at the nurse and she says, "It's almost like she's been here before, but she's never been here before. You know what I mean?" The nurse said, yeah, sometimes they know. They proceed to the back, and the nurse goes ahead and gets Angela's vitals. Her blood pressure looks good. Her temperature is great. Her pulse is great. Her O2 levels are great. And surprisingly, she's lost 13 pounds since her last appointment. The nurse tells her that's actually a good thing because even though she's not considered obese, her BMI is a little high. But as a black woman, she's actually pretty slim thick, if you know what I mean. So those 13 pounds ain't gonna hurt her, but it actually makes her even healthier in preparation for her embryo transfer. So she goes into the office and she follows the typical procedure. She gives a urine sample so that they can test her urine for proteins as well as test her HCG levels and her other hormones to make sure that they're in the proper range for the transplant. She changes into a gown. She gets up on the bed and she patiently waits for the doctor to come in. So the doctor comes in and he says, all right, I understand that your mother-in-law is in the waiting room. Before I come back, call her back, are there any things that you want to talk about? And she says, well, I know that we're doing this appointment in preparation for the embryo transfer to possibly occur on Thursday. Can you go over some of the things that might prevent me from being able to do the transfer on Thursday? The doctor says, of course, absolutely. If for some reason your hormone levels aren't in the correct range, if you have any type of infections, if you don't feel overall well, if you aren't able to go home and rest after the procedure, if you're unable to have someone here with you during the procedure, wait with you the entire time of the procedure, and transport you home after the procedure. We also need you to rest at home for at least 24 hours. And then we need you to be able to take it easy for the next 7 to 10 days while we wait for the implantation to be completed. If you're unable to comply with all of those things, then we'll need to delay the implantation. Is that going to be a problem? Angela bites her fingernail and thinks to herself, how on earth am I going to pull this off? If Marcus leaves the country tomorrow and I get the implantation on Thursday and then he's gone for 5 or 6 days, who on earth am I going to get to drive me here, stay with me, take me home, and stay with me for 7 whole days? She says, Lord, I'm trusting you to make a way. She says to the doctor, no, sir, that's not going to be a problem at all. I absolutely am going to be able to work that out. Unfortunately, my husband isn't going to be in town, but I'm sure that I'll be able to find the help that I need and the support that I need to get this done. The doctor says, listen, we can always wait until next month. Unfortunately, that means that you're going to have to continue with the hormones for another month, and you're going to have to abstain from intercourse until after we do that implant. Or we can skip a month and we can go back to business as usual, wait a month, and then start the injections again in preparation for the next month. Angela says, absolutely not. If my body is ready now, I'm ready. We're ready. We're ready to do this. The doctor says, okay, great. Are you ready for your mother-in-law? Angela says, sure. The doctor says, okay, I'll have the nurse go and bring her back. So Miss Brenda comes and has a seat by Angela's head, and the doctor gets her in the stirrups, and he does the physical examination. He palpates, and he feels, and he measures, and all of those great things. And then he has the nurse to bring in the ultrasound machine. So the nurse brings in the ultrasound machine, and immediately Miss Brenda says, I don't feel so good. The nurse says, oh no, is everything okay? Angela says, oh no, Miss Brenda, what's going on? My mother-in-law's been having problems with her thyroid, and this is the first day that she's been out of the house in quite some time. I knew this was a bad idea. Miss Brenda, are you okay? She starts getting really nervous. Miss Brenda says, baby, it's okay. It's okay. It's probably just something that I ate. Let me go to the restroom. You all keep going, and I'll be right back. So Miss Brenda steps out of the room to go to the restroom, And the doctor asks her, do you want to proceed or do you want to wait for her to come back? And she says, no, let's just go ahead, because if we wait for her after she told us to go ahead, she's going to be really upset with us. And so the nurse and the doctor kind of chuckle and says, I know that's right. She seems kind of like the bossy type. And Angela says, if I have a little girl, I want her to be just like Miss Brenda. So the doctor says, I know that's right. And so he goes ahead and he proceeds with the ultrasound. And everything's pretty quiet. And Angela says, does everything look okay? The doctor says, yeah, everything looks great. And he does some measurements, and it doesn't seem any different than any other appointment that she's had. So she feels pretty confident that everything's going well. So the doctor finishes up, and just as he turns the machine off, Miss Brenda walks back into the room. So Miss Brenda says, all right, I'm back. I told you it was just something that I ate. Oh, I think I had the little bubble guts, baby. That's all it was. And so the doctor says, everything looks good. We will give you a call tomorrow and let you know what the results are and confirm your appointment for Thursday, unless there's an issue, but it doesn't look like there's going to be any kind of issues. So we'll give you a ring, like I said, after those test results are back. Take it easy today, because we did do a lot of poking and prodding, and you might be a little sore. And Angela's like, well, I have to go to work today, especially if I need to be ready for implantation on Thursday. And the doctor says, well, yeah, you can definitely go to work. You're not on any kind of restriction. I just don't want you to go out and try to run any marathons or anything. And so they all kind of chuckle. And Angela says, thank you, Doc. I really appreciate you. You've really been a rock over these last 2 years. I really hope that this is like the end of the road as it pertains to this IVF process. And the doctor says, I understand you're a praying woman. Angela says, yes, sir, I am. And he says, well, I'm a praying man. We got this. Angela smiles and looks at Miss Brenda and says, who knew? So they all leave the room so that Angela can change her clothes. And Angela gets a chill up her spine in that moment. She looks over at the ultrasound machine and she says out loud to God, Lord, it's in your hands. She changes into her clothes. She goes out to meet Miss Brenda. She completes checkout and they go to the car. When they get out to the car, Angela says to Miss Brenda, now Miss Brenda, where would you like to go for breakfast? Miss Brenda says, what is the name of that place that you and Regina took me to? They have the best French toast. Angela says, give me a little bit more. Miss Brenda says, and they have homemade syrup. Angela says, oh, famous toastery. Miss Brenda says, I think that's it. All I know is they have the best French toast this side of the Mason-Dixon line, and that homemade syrup is to die for. And Angela says, well, it's right around the corner. Let's go. When they pull up to Famous Toastery, even though it's 10:30 a.m., there is a wait. And there are a number of couples and small groups waiting for tables. So Angela says to Miss Brenda, go ahead and have a seat, and I'll go up there and check and find out how long the wait is. How long are you willing to wait before we leave and find someplace else to eat? Miss Brenda says, oh, baby, I'm willing to wait for Jesus' return for that French toast and that homemade syrup. Angela and Miss Brenda laugh, and Angela goes up to the hostess stand to find out how long the wait is. She passes a couple who has their back to her, and when they hear her voice, they turn around. It's Regina and LJ. Regina says, Angela. Angela says, Regina. LJ says, what up, shawty? Angela says, oh my goodness, what is the chance that I would run into you two here? What y'all doing here? Ain't y'all supposed to be at work? Regina and LJ both laugh and in unison say, we playing hooky. What you doing here? Angela says, oh, I had a doctor's appointment and Miss Brenda came with me. And you know, Regina, ever since we brought her here 5 years ago, she will never forget about their French toast. In the background, you hear Miss Brenda say, and their homemade syrup. And everybody laughs, including the hostess. Angela says to Regina and LJ, how long have you been waiting? They say, oh, we've been here about 5 minutes. The wait's not that long. Go ahead and see if we can get a table for 4 and maybe we can all sit together. And Angela says, sure, no problem. So Angela goes up to the hostess saying, ask the hostess if there's any way that the parties can be combined and how long the wait would be. The hostess tells her, oh, well, for a party of 4, we have a table available right now. We just don't have a lot of parties of 2 and 3 available, but we actually do have a booth available for a party of 4 right now. Miss Brenda says, look at God. He may not show up when you want him, and they all say, but he's always on time. The hostess walks them to their table, and Miss Brenda says, well, you know, this old bladder ain't gonna wait for nobody. So I'm gonna go ahead to the restroom, and I'm gonna give y'all 3 a few minutes to catch up. LJ, didn't you have something that you wanted to tell Angela? Everybody looks at LJ. Then everybody looks at Angela. Angela's beat red in the face, and she says, oh my goodness, Miss Brenda, I can't believe you just did that. Miss Brenda says, believe it, baby, and walks away. LJ looks at Angela and says, Shotty, what on earth did you tell Miss Brenda? Angela says, very little, I promise. She's just really that intuitive. Now, what exactly was it that you needed to tell me so bad that you left me a voicemail and called me this morning while I was on my way to the doctor? Marcus says, well, it's not like I knew you were on your way to the doctor. Chill out, Shotty. Angela says, okay, well, what's up? And I thought we was over this whole Marcus and all this mess. And he's like, over what? Over you? Oh, I've been over you, Shotty. I upgraded. And they all start laughing. And she says, no, seriously. He's like, yeah, seriously. I don't have no beef with Marcus. Y'all grown. Y'all do what y'all want to do. But you are my best friend. And what I heard, you need to know about it. Angela says, LJ, is this something that will keep for at least the next 7 to 10 days? LJ thinks about it and says, I think so. Angela says, great, because this next week is really crucial in my life and I don't need any stress. LJ says, Shawty, if you change your mind, all you gotta do is call me. I got you.